Hi, this is Mark Shapiro with Klamath Film, and I am thrilled to be here with the cast and crew of the film Bent, which you all have seen, which was a mind-turning film, a lot of action, a lot of intrigue, scary at moments, and I'm really thrilled to have the folks from the film, and we're going to have Ray Robison, producer on the film, introduce the crew and talk a little bit about the filmmaking and this great film. Ray, I'll kick it off with you.
All right, thank you so much, and thanks for having our film at the Klamath Independent Film Festival. Always a treat being over there. So we shot Bent, hard to believe, nearly 6 years ago. Brad Douglas wrote and directed the film. He's based out of Sacramento, and worked with Marlon Mason, who plays Elsie Coleman, a number of times. So we had Marlon cast from the get-go. I think the role was probably written for her. And then we had the opportunity for the first time I say discovering, but I've actually known Clive for a while. But we were fortunate enough to have Clive come in and take the role of Ben Coleman in the film, and it just clicked so well. It was shooting on location, even though it was so close, because Hyatt Lake, where we filmed, is between Medford, Ashland, and Klamath Falls. So it really wasn't that far away. And some of the cast and crew would go back and forth, but some of them would stay up and at the location instead of driving back and forth. So a nice group of people, and I think 2 weeks of filming. So anyway, got it done, but took a long time to get it finally to the screen, to the Klamath Film Festival screen. But maybe we can talk about that more, and Marlon and Clive can talk about that whole experience a little bit more too.
Great. And so will you introduce yourself? Why don't we start with Marlon? Tell us about yourself. I know you've been at the Climate Film before, but first maybe introduce yourself and talk about a little bit about this film and the project.
Okay. Well, my name is Marlon Mason, and I'll try to put it in a little capsule. I'm considered one of the episodic queens of the 60s television, because I did nearly every television episode that there was. Uh, and I did a series called Long Street with James Franciscus. Anyway, my career came to a halt. I came to Oregon, and 11 years after I was here, Ray and I wrote something. I gave it to Ray, and I've been making independent films ever since, and mostly with him. And he introduced me to Brad, and that's how I got into this film. But it wasn't my first film with Brad. I am Brad's Alfred Hitchcock. I'm in all his movies because he's such fun to work with. And I grabbed him by the throat and I insisted that he put me in all his movies. So he has. And this one was great fun because I got to work with my friend Clive, who back in the 80s, he and I did a Charles in Charge together. And so we had a great time on this. I think he will agree. And I play a rather deranged old lady. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to give anything away. I'll see what Clive, we'll go back and forth, see how much we should give away. But it was a wonderful role.
So I guess Clive, the pressure's on you. You can give spoilers because people have already watched the film. But Clive, but I would like to have you talk briefly about your career too. But what a role you played in this film too, because we go back and forth with all the different characters, but your character goes from nice to pretty deranged and angry. What was that? What was it like playing that role?
Well, I echo what Marlon said about her career in the 60s. I was in LA for 18 years, and I came up here I was hired at OSF in 2004. But alas, I was not asked back, and I only did one season, so I decided to stay up in Oregon rather than go back to California. And I had known Marlon from LA, of course, and she called me out of the blue one night and says, "Clive, what are you doing?" And rather ominous question. And it turns out apparently another actor had been cast in the role of Ben, but for some reason, Ray could probably fill you in on that. He dropped out, and she asked me if I was interested, and I got the script, and I was a bit daunted by the amount of dialogue, I must say, after all these years trying to learn lines again. But turned out to be a lot of fun. The one thing I do remember with distinct memory is that perilous drive from Ashland up to Lake Hyatt, especially at night. It wasn't something I was very keen on doing, but I fortunately was staying up there. So, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. Ben Coleman, is that his last name, Ray? It's been so
Yes.
long since we've shot this. I'm trying to remember my character. He plays a former scientist, I believe, that has something to do with the poisoning of the lakes, of the mountain lakes up there. And he turns into be rather a despicable character, intolerant of his wife, and a young journalist that shows up to start investigating. So yeah, a bit of fun to work with Brad Douglas, and it's always fun to play villains. They're much more interesting to play than heroes. So,
Well, what was interesting though, Clive, was how although you play the villain, you're pretty warm until maybe the arc, changes in the film, and
right.
you've got that kind of fatherly connection, and we trust it, and then we get to that point, and things change, and that makes it even more powerful, for
Yeah,
that third act.
yeah, he's deceptively nice at the beginning, and suddenly turns. It's that's fun to play.
And the other thing, Ray, what's interesting about this film, again, there were moments where, I mean, there's, the sadness and, of dementia or whatever, is happening, and, they're pretending to eat the food and things like that. So there were moments of levity because even the way the characters interacted in those moments. Can you talk a little bit about that? This was not straight horror or suspense. There were a lot of elements to the film, and what was the direction, sort of as you were working with the screenplay? How did it change?
Well, what's really interesting about this film is that it didn't start out as a film. It actually started out as three. We had scripts for three pilot episodes with the idea that we would create this pilot and try to sell it. But when that never happened, it became, okay, how do we bring it all back and tie all these loose ends together to turn it into a feature film? So the direction, even on some of those details, I would say we didn't even know where it was going to go at that point, but it certainly added a great deal of interest and established a great deal about the characters, who they were, what issues they were dealing with. It is very unusual to because I've never experienced this before, where you have some pilot episodes and you go, okay, it's not going to get sold, so let's just turn it into a feature film. And so the scenes in the hospital that open with the actual FBI agent, those were all shot within the last few months. Everything else was nearly 6 years ago. And then hopefully you can't tell that Abby had aged nearly 6 years in the filming, but of course she's supposed to look pretty beat up in the hospital room anyway. So that's how it all kind of came together, unintentionally turned into a feature film.
Yeah, and I think it worked with her in the hospital because you're right. She had gone through this really traumatic experience and showed, the wear from the trauma, and great acting. I really enjoyed that part. And Marlon, your role is so all over the place too. Can you talk about what was it like playing that character? Because it wasn't just a flat character. There was a lot of depth.
Oh, well, I just try to find all the depth I can in any character I play, and sometimes I have to get very inventive. But I really try to stick to what the writer has written, and stay and work within that frame piece. But my main thing is I always find it doing anything is you make it real. And so I don't think of it in terms as being a horror movie or anything. I play it all for real because then I find it's scarier. And so I just fell into the whole dementia thing. I've had some experience with that. Some say I might be having personal experience with it. I'm just joking. Personal in the sense that my dad had dementia, and my sister. So I just know that I just found myself getting into a state of dementia of just imagination, really. And I didn't know each time I would do a take, I never quite knew how I was going to do it. And that's how I work anyway. But it was great fun for me to play the levels. But basically, it was just being truth. I play scene by scene, and it's just playing the nut of the scene and what is wanted by the writer in it, and then my taking it and doing something that will hopefully capture the audience's attention and caring. That's my main thing. I always want the audience to care about my characters. And but once the director says action, I just go, and I don't know what I'm doing until, like with Clive, I didn't know how I was going to at the end there when it gets a little bit violent with the two of us. I just waited to hear action, and then I just sort of flip into another world. And I don't know how I do it, but it's a lot of fun. And I love making horror movies. Anybody wants me for a horror movie, you can find me through Ray.
And Clive, same to you with this one too, because you're there. There's sense of you're a big guy, and there's this warmth to you, and that really did almost throughout the film. And then obviously there are the moments where they're both coming back from the tow shop, and you realize that they're out in the shed. Do you remember shooting that moment, and what was that like for you? Kind of that was really when you realized something was going on.
Well, I remember early on in the process of thinking of a character like Emmett Walsh used to play. He had that nice, silky, voice, very quiet, very not assuming, and then all of a sudden he turns into a monster. And I remember that scene out by the shed. It was dark, and I had I guess it was an axe in my hand, and fortunately, the director could call cut before any great damage is done, which was that part was good because it was night and I can remember seeing much. But yeah, it was a great, fun character to play. Finding the different levels in him.
What was the sort of the energy on the set? Do you remember, again, it's 6 years ago, but do you remember how many days of the shoot was it? And maybe we'll start with you, Marlon, to talk about, when you heard cut, what was the connection between the actors like? Because you've known each other for a long time. Was it a lot of fun to make this film?
Oh, yeah. Well, I've worked with Abby, and I've worked a lot together. And we did another horror film, Besetment, that Brad also did. And um, it's, I don't know, acting is just our job. There, you do the scene, and then the director says cut, and you might have to do it again, and you just sort of wait. Nobody, you don't clown around or anything. It's just, it's, I don't know. It's probably boring to a lot of people who would, if somebody was visiting and watched, they say, God, you guys just, there's a lot of standing around. And but we all get along. But I don't have anything special about any shenanigans going on the side, of fun or practical jokes and things that sometimes I would do in my old days in Hollywood. We'd do a lot of practical jokes, but um, you're doing an independent film and you want to get it done. And you don't have a lot of money, so you can't waste any time. You got to just get in there and get it done. And that's the professional part of it, and we all have that. So we get the job done, and but at the same time, there's just a sense of we really can't wait to jump in the ring and just start doing our roles. It's when they say it's cut, it gets kind of boring. We want to get back in the ring.
And Clive talked about some of his inspiration. What about for you? Some of the um, people or characters that inspired you as you act, and maybe even for this role?
Oh, I just worked from my gut, from my brain. I don't I can't think off the top of my head of anybody particular that I've kind of focused on for a role. I just kind of do what the writer wants. I I think I'll have to think about that. That's a good question.
I because I saw there were so many different elements. Your personality came out in so many different ways, and I wondered, growing up,
Oh,
were there
oh,
people that
oh,
inspired you when you went to movies or films?
oh. So who inspired me? Well, believe it or not, Doris Day and Betty Hutton were my first two. I wanted to be a singer, and that was my goal. I wanted to be a Broadway star, and then I sang. What did I don't know. If I think it was just getting older. I wanted to be an actress who sang. And my one of my goals was to star in a Broadway musical, and I did. That was on my bucket list. I'm on my third bucket list now. I'm 84, and so I'm still at it. Ray and I we're in the middle of a movie now called The Plan. I want to call it Driving Miss Crazy, so that gives you kind of a hint of what it's about. But it's a horror film, and yeah, so I had those movie stars, Betty Davis, Stanwyck, Joan Crawford. I had all those ladies to look to, but um, I sort of had a natural sense, and also I had a drama teacher that said, "You're all characters. You all are different people. Don't try to copy anybody. In other words, don't try to be Marlon Brando. Find your own real the thing that makes you different." And so that's I was raised that way in acting class, and so everything is pretty original, comes from me. And I might draw on somebody if I'm doing an imitation. I do a wonderful Catherine Hepburn, and I would love to play her, but that's the end of that. This is probably the only time I get to do my Catherine Hepburn. um, anyway, I don't know if I answered your question or
Yeah, of
not, but
course.
if you're an actor, you got to be inventive. Got to
Right.
come up with your own stuff. Don't copy anybody
Well, the film is
except
bent.
Catherine Hepburn.
Yes, the film is bent. We really love this film. And Ray, before we sign off, I want to ask a couple more questions. Can you talk about the title itself? What was the reasoning behind the title Bent?
Who knows? I think Clive and Marlon will agree. Who knows? So actually, the original title of the series was The Stem, and it pertained to the idea of the mosquitoes and the lake and all that. But basically, Brad Douglas, after he started directing films, um, the first one was named Big, and then the second one was Besetment, and then it's sort of like, well, I should have all my films starting with a B. So I guess it was sort of like naming hurricanes, that kind of thing. Okay, what name is next? It just has to start with a B. So that's where it went to Bent. And honestly, I'm not really quite sure how we decided on Bent, other than the fact that it started with a B.
And these two characters are bent.
That's yeah.
And I'm waiting for Brad to write one called Bitch, and I better be the bitch.
So there's the recurrent mayor, Green Springs Prairie commercial on TV. Who wants to take that one? The mayor keeps coming on and talking about Green Springs, the beginning, middle, and the end, kind of the cult. Clive, does anyone or Bray or Marlon, anyone want to take that one on?
I don't,
Mm,
I don't
Okay.
have reference.
yeah.
So they go ahead. I'm
So,
sorry.
so what specifically you're asking about that? We shot all that on green screen, actually outdoor on green screen. Almost the first thing we shot in production, I believe, very early on in production, doing that with the idea that it would be used that way, just to give this hints of other other things going on, that there's greater depth in this community than just this couple that we meet. It's like the whole community is in, there's something else going on. There's something deeper, and certainly that with what he does there implies that it's a strange community, neighborhood, area that she's stumbled into. It's not just this one couple that are a part of that.
I want to talk a little bit about my last questions for each of you about what's going on. You mentioned, Marlon mentioned what your tease of what you're shooting right now. What else? What else is on the horizon for all of you, starting with Clive?
Okay, I'm currently on a different chapter in my life. I'm writing a series of private eye novels featuring a Hollywood actor, Private Eye Eddie Collins. The sixth one just came out on August 14th, and I'm working on a seventh one. And so independent film sort of jumped into my lap, and I'll continue to do them if I'm asked. But my main focus right now is writing.
Great. We'll go to Marlon.
Oh, and his books are wonderful. His main character that Clive writes about is Eddie Collins. It's a wonderful, wonderful series of books. So I highly recommend the readers look into it. Well, and I'm 84, so I spend most of my time taking care of myself. I walk 2 miles every day, and I just take the jobs as they come. Brad and Ray have kept me very busy. I owe my independent film part of my life totally to Ray, and or actually to somebody who told me to call him when I moved to Medford, and I can't remember who that person was. And I said to Ray, I wished I knew who made that connection, because he and I met for coffee for 3 years before we started doing this. So anyway, we've got the plan, and then I think Brad is doing a sequel to Bad Fish, which is another horror film that is just now opening, and or has opened, and he's doing a sequel to that. And I know I'm in all his films, so I don't know. I'll be playing the same role, but I don't know what he has me doing in it. So I just wait for anybody to ask me if they want me for a role. I'll go do it. They have to pay my way. That's all. I'm
And
cheap.
yeah, and Ray, tell us about what you have in front of you there.
Well, before we go on to what I've got going on, I just should mention, because this definitely does tie in with Clive's books, and I reached over very quickly and found two on my shelf that I have. But the one that's coming out right now is called Room Tone, and actually, when we were filming, our sound guy was just a real stickler for getting plenty of room tone, and there's a lot of stopping. All right, on room tones, it's like we don't. And then, so Clive, during all this process, he got, I'm going to title my next book Room Tone. So, and it's now out. So people can look for that, and they can know that that's where the title comes from, is our production of Bent and what was going on there. So like Marlon said, we've got The Plan, which is another Brad Douglas written project. We did start shooting some green screen in studio work a month or two ago, and we will pick up again later this fall to finish that film. I also do have a project, low budget indie project scheduled for March called The Golden Age, which very interesting comedy about elderly people who are used to be superheroes, or maybe they just believe they were, but they're all in their own group home in their latter years. So should be an interesting, fun project. And just to kind of step back what you'd asked about what was going on with Seth in the group, because our crew, I think all of us had worked together before. Very few people came into this group new. I think Clive, this is the first time he had worked with this team before. I think we had one SOU digital cinema intern who worked with us her first time, but we all knew each other. And when I first made that offer out to everyone that because we had a lodge up there. So it's like, well, you can either stay at the lodge or you can, drive back and sleep in your own bed every night. And I would say 90% of the crew said, "Oh, I'm going to stay up there." So, and I think it was a part of because it is such a great group of people that have worked together so much here in the Southern Oregon area that they felt very comfortable just living up there, getting up every morning, having breakfast with the crew, and working that day, and then spending the evening together. So it was a very cohesive group, and a group of people that I love working with, and will probably continue working with on future projects.
Well, I want to thank you again on behalf of Klamath Film for this fun film, Bent. Marlon, Clive, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll keep our eyes out for you for more, and we really appreciate you taking the time with us today. Thank you again.
Thank you.